his future is in a Cleveland Browns uniform or elsewhere.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into the third and final preseason postgame show on the OBR streaming network, and we have got a late night quick show for you tonight because we're all trying to go to bed. The Cleveland Browns fall in their preseason finale out in Seattle in what amounted to be a pretty fun game to watch, although it took forever. And the Browns now on their way to the regular season. There are no more preseason games left, and it is just time to get into real football. And now it's time to talk about who's going to make the team, who's not going to make the team, the structure of the team. And we can really kind of dive in tonight to really what we learned from the last preseason game and what it means for this team going forward. So we're going to dive into all of that. Thank you for joining us here on the OBR streaming network. At this, it's 1:23 in the morning Eastern time, and we're going to dive into all of it. So shout out to all of you. Look at the comments are already going crazy. You people are crazy. We are crazy, and we're excited to join you for this post-game show. Joining you tonight, I'm your host, Michael Keefe at Garage Beers Mike, and joining me around the horn, Brad Ward, Pete Smith, Casey Kinnaman. Boys, I'm so glad to not talk about preseason football anymore. I don't know how you guys are feeling, but I'm ready to not talk about this anymore.
What are you talking about? We got a whole show ahead of us. You're introducing a show where we're going to talk about preseason football.
Yep. And my point still stands. Yep.
Okay.
The point is, we got to be excited to be talking about regular season football now, right? We got rosters getting finalized on Tuesday. We're going to know some of the question marks. I don't think there's a ton of question marks when it comes to the roster of the Cleveland Browns. We're going to know some answers on Tuesday. It's just time to get ready for the Dallas Cowboys and week one. And I'm fired up for it. I'm fired up for that. I'm not fired up for preseason football anymore. Casey, you're nodding, you're shaking, you're nodding, you're doing a lot of this.
Yeah.
How you feeling, man? How you feeling?
Well, up until about 2 minutes ago, it was going to say I survived the preseason behind me until Mikey Trees gave me something to celebrate. But yeah, I don't know exactly how much I learned from tonight. To your point, I think 95% of this roster was written in Sharpie coming into it, So now by the time that plane lands, they're going to have roughly about 54 hours to solidify everything. They might try to move a couple players, get some assets or some guys that they're going to cut either way. But I don't know. We've seen some good motor play from Jeremiah Martin, another guy who I'm hoping makes the practice squad. But to me, for me, that's what tonight was about. Was who you going to try to get to stick around and be on the practice squad? That's what I learned.
It's a good thing that Mikey Trees is written in chalk, if you're talking about Ben, because I don't think he's one of the ones in marker there, buddy.
That is a fact.
It's sad because he's had a good preseason. But hey, listen, we'll get into all that. Hey, Pete Smith, been a minute. Haven't heard your voice yet. You had a late night last night. Coaching a little Streetsboro football. How'd that game go? How'd it go?
It was good. We beat CVCA. Reasonably close game. They got a couple of really, really good players. As far as
I saw you on the highlights.
You saw me?
Yeah. I saw you walking in one of the highlights.
I don't know how many shots they take in the box. But anyway, so the biggest thing I take away from this is what the Browns' focus is on the preseason. They're not trying to compete. They have very specific goals they're trying to achieve, because you're sitting there going, hey, they got a bunch of starters on defense, and then Justin Hardy is out there at corner, who's not a corner. He does not do this. Like, he is a special teams guy, and you're watching him try to cover DK Metcalf. It's like, all right, cool. Like, he's getting beat. He got beat again. So, like, you have to sort of take some of the stuff with a grain of salt, which is fine. Like, I'm happy to. For me, I'm more interested in younger players. I mean, the biggest achievement I think for this was we didn't see 3 offensive tackles leave the game with injuries. I think the only notable injury, at least to this point, that we know about is Foreman potential rib injury. He may have just fallen on the ball. So like that is the first thing, just getting out of there. Maybe there was, guys evaluated for a head injury, but like relatively clean slate. That's the big thing. And then beyond that, I'm just interested in young player development. We saw a lot of guys getting reps, which is good. Certainly you're seeing some guys fight for either practice squad consideration or the end of the roster, special teams. And then the guys you are hoping that you're going to trade or induce somebody to trade. Nathan Zagura was trying so hard, and I appreciate him for this. Reasonably well. Like if you're sitting there going, hey, if you're looking at teams like with Josh Johnson, Trace McSorley, and Easton Stick, and you're going, hey, Tyler Huntley threw 3 touchdowns, throw us a draft pick, then you're pretty happy with that stuff too. So like, you're not going to take like huge takeaways from this. I guess the experiment of Zaire Mitchell-Paden was interesting. They wanted a real wide tight end. They didn't want to put Njoku out there, which thank God. So you got to, there were calls for people thinking he's like Sunday ready. I didn't get a sense that he's really Sunday ready. I think he's improved since he's gotten here, which is good, but I still don't see a compelling reason to keep more than 2 tight ends, which is funny because Zagura basically said the same thing.
No,
in fact, he's setting up these roster decisions. Like, don't get too excited about some of these players; they're not going to be here.
Well, and listen, we're going to get into some of the different positions, but I'll say one of the things that stood out for me. You kind of ended it with tight end there, and maybe we just start here and just kind of plow our way through because really. Hey, it's OBR. It's 1:30 in the morning. I'm not about to watch my mouth. Who gives a shit about the game and what happened and the result? And none of that matters. I'm sitting there at 11 o'clock at night. I had the game on my driveway on the garage door. It was great. We were hanging out. I had some of the neighbors over. And I'm watching people get real upset about results of plays. And I'm like, that's not what we're doing here tonight. Who cares about any of that? But I did think, for me, as I was watching the game, I think really one of the more interesting storylines as this specific game went on. We talked about Mitchell-Paden, and we've kind of followed him as this offseason has gone along. But then you have Trayon Welch come in. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, guys, is where they decided to line him up throughout the course of his snaps, because there were times where Trayon Welch came in and lined up as like kind of a true tight end close to the line of scrimmage. Then they had him lining up wide out, like all the way out to the sideline. They were doing a lot of really interesting things, I think, with him. And it made me feel like this is the guy, we might like Mitchell-Paden because of some of the things he brings, but it made me feel like they're really interested in Trayon Welch and what he can maybe potentially do for the passing game for the Cleveland Browns. And again, knowing that we're talking about depth and we're not talking about a top 2 tight end, did anybody else get that feeling? Especially tonight, I really felt like they were throwing Trayon Welch out there in a lot of different positions to see kind of how we could acclimate.
I think so, but to Pete's point, I think it was just so late, when he got kind of his reps that I felt like I kind of feel like that room maybe is just 2, what Pete's been saying the whole time, and you hope to hang on to somebody on the practice squad just in case, whether that be Welch and Paden or just Paden. But yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy, no doubt, Mike. I just think it was so late in the game when he started to get those reps that it just kind of meaningless for me a little bit. A couple things I wanted to hit on. I thought it was interesting to Pete's point about Hardy in coverage. Sure, they're trying stuff. I don't understand the purpose of putting him in coverage the entire game. I don't really know why they did that, but sure, I guess they just wanted to give him reps out there, but kind of pointless because you hope to never see that in the game, right? Like that's your last resort. And then we saw less of
Brad. Pause on that for a minute, and then we'll come back to your other points because, obviously Justin Hardy, a guy that a lot of people were pretty excited they brought in because of what he's able to do special teams wise, and he's a special teams Pro Bowler. and
then you make the team,
and then you stick him out. Then you stick him out there
yeah.
covering DK Metcalf, and the poor guy. He was in such good position, and then he just falls on his ass, and DK Metcalf catches a touchdown. But Pete, Casey, we haven't heard from you in a minute. Just the thoughts on the team sticking him out there and just having him play cornerback throughout basically the course of the night.
Puzzling, because I think you got other guys you'd like to get an actual look at and kind of evaluate, especially earlier in the game, because he's not that's if he's out there in the regular season, then it's all went to hell in a handbasket.
Oh my God!
So I don't get the giving him those looks. You know what he is, and you don't even need to see what he is during the preseason. You know, he's a special teams ace, and that's his calling card. That's why he's going to make the roster. And I would have liked to see Khalif Halassi out there on DK Metcalf. For me, that would have been the move. So it was very puzzling for me.
So real quick question, especially with, obviously punts are still punts, but with the new kickoff rules coming into play, we talk about special teams aces, and now you've got this guy on the team who is a true special teams ace, and he's a Cleveland guy, and the storyline is so good with Justin Hardy and all that. But how does the new kickoff rule change the way we view special teams aces? Because again, with a very dramatic change in the way the game is played, you've got a guy like Hardy who made a living in special teams. How does this new rule and the way they line up and all that affect a guy like Hardy? Pete, your thoughts on that?
Well, Hardy should be fine because he's 6'1", 200 pounds. I think it hurts the guys that are like Tony Brown size, who is like 175, 180 pounds. They're like that true speedy guy who does nothing but run down the field and stuff. I think Hardy's got enough sort of size and toughness that he can, like I'm happy to criticize him for being out there corner. I will say this: he gets off blocks and makes tackles at corner, which is, if you're trying to sort of look at it through the lens of special teams and the new kickoff rules, that's the job now. So that part is positive. But yet, to your point, I watched Sam Kamara make a tackle on kickoff. Like, that is a change. It's going to be curious to see how that happens. So, like, a guy like, if you're just using Sam Kamara's size as an example, a guy like Michael Hall or theoretically Maurice Hurst could be on the field in that scenario. This is sort of an evolving thing. And my preference is still kick that thing out of the back of the end zone because they don't care. And it's just trying to set you up to fail. But if you are in that position, you've got to actually put the guys on the ground. So that's where you've got to sort of figure this thing out. But ultimately, I don't think, again, I think the Tony Browns of the world might be slightly affected, but ultimately I think this is way more about punt in terms of special teams and way more about those type of specials that you can't avoid the way you can with kickoff.
I think that Hardy's safe this year as their special teams ace, but I will say, like, last year they kept two guys as special teams aces, right? Like, and now they're keeping one this year as just special teams ace. I think we're trending towards a point where if you're going to make the 53, you're going to have to do something else and be a special teams player. Like, I don't think you can just do that. Like, beyond this year, I find it hard. Like, it's going to hurt them this year in their corner room to not be able to keep one of those extra corners because they're keeping Justin Hardy. Do you know what I mean? Like, you would like to be able to keep Harden and Halassi, I think, and you're not going to be able to keep both because you're keeping Hardy. And I think in the long term, you're just going to have to make one of those guys be able to do what Hardy does or sacrifice that part of the game and say you're going to have to figure it out else how. Like, you can't – I don't think moving into 2025 you can just have one guy that just does that. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like we're trending that direction.
Boys, does it feel a little bit – and maybe this is a simplistic look at it, but with the new kickoff rule, and we've talked about it a lot, and I don't want to harp on it. But I feel like in the past, you could put together a group of guys on coverage units that could be pretty similar on a punt coverage and a kick coverage. And you feel pretty good about it because you've got a lot of gunners going down the field, trying to make plays and shed tackles and all that. And then all of a sudden, you've got this punt coverage. And you saw the Browns struggle with punt coverage tonight. And again, it's backups, even in the special teams unit. But you saw the Browns struggle with punt coverage. you've got punt coverage now, which is very, very different than the new kick coverage situation. Does it make it harder to assemble a special teams roster, assemble a group of guys on special teams, knowing that maybe you can put some guys on the kick coverage that you would never have on the punt coverage, but you got to figure out how you're going to kind of assemble that group of guys?
I think it's less difficult.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. Because now you're using linebackers and guys like Kamara out there, where in the past on kickoffs, those guys weren't really on kickoff coverage at all. Now you can use bigger bodies. Like, the assortment of guys that you can use on kickoff coverage is easier to find now than it was before. So I think it actually makes it less needy of somebody that can just do that.
I think the answer is maybe. And that's largely because it's going to be risk reward. Are you going to be happy to have sort of potentially premium guys out there in that weird collision environment? Like Myles Garrett would be great on the new kickoff rule. I don't want to see Myles Garrett out there.
Right.
They've got and the Browns have a lot of those
McGuire or something.
Types. The Browns have a lot of those body types. Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire, like you could theoretically put in that role. Is that what you really want to do? Hard to say. That's why, in a lot of ways, I would just say avoid it, give them the ball in the 30, and then we revisit this next year when the NFL comes back and goes, no, the 35 now.
35, 40.
We'll see. But, like, it's just tough to sort of really figure it out. I mean, we're starting to get a sense, at least in this game, what the Browns are messing around with. I mean, you saw what amounted to be an offensive formation. Like, I just look like deuces to me. So we'll see where this sort of goes in terms of the types of players you put back there. There's not enough information to really get a good judge. But to me, the way I've sort of described the kickoff is it's just going to be formation football without formation rules, where you can just line them up like your linemen or whatever, wherever the hell you want, and then you just do a football play. Now, to this point, hasn't really meant anything. And the other part we don't know, along with the risk reward thing, is everybody's hypothesizing, well, what if Tyreek Hill is back there and all these things? I'm still seeing guys get whacked at high speeds, and I'm very curious to see if anyone of these people are going to do it. And yes, we've seen Deontay Foreman in that capacity, and it's kind of interesting. Jerome Ford theoretically could be good in that capacity. They've obviously got Nyheim Hines, that was part of the reason they signed him. Yeah. He has yet to be activated. So there's a lot of like missing pieces and questions that sort of remain out there with this. And I just don't think we have enough to go on to really make any firm judgments. I think the NFL in large part is sitting there wondering the same thing.
I'll tell you, I saw them stick Deontay Foreman out there to return kicks tonight. And I was like, please put him on the bench right now. Please. Anybody else, put this dude on the bench. But listen, I think we can get into some other, and I've got a couple that I have written down, and I want you guys to get into more of what you think is interesting. But to me, a lot of what we talked about in the game, a lot of what Chris Rose and Nathan Zagura and the broadcast crew talked about during the game, and really, to me, at this point, a lot of what's going to happen with the Cleveland Browns as far as rotations and position groups and all that. To me right now, the most interesting question or the most interesting point, and they made a point that I'm not sure I even really agree with, is the offensive line, because Kevin Stefanski came out and said before this game that he feels really good that the offensive line is going to be at full strength. Was it Barry that said it? Yeah, Barry did say it. I'm sorry. Barry said that he feels real good that the offensive line is going to be going into the season at full strength, which means we're talking about Jack Conklin ready to play. We're talking about Jed Wells ready to play. And we're talking about Big Thanos ready to play. And we're talking about that tackle position. And so, boys, give me your thoughts on like on the broadcast, they were like, hey, DeJuan Jones is your starting right tackle. And then they're going to have to figure it out from there. Is that how we feel? Is that how we feel? Because if Jack Conklin's ready to go and Jed Wells is ready to go, how are they going to sort out those three guys as your starting tackles?
His exact quote, real quick, was something to the effect of, we hope to get or we think we'll get our guys back in the next 2 weeks, right? Like, it wasn't like for sure they'll be there, but he was like alluded to the fact that they would be back in the next 2 weeks. For me, it's DeJuan Jones is your starting right tackle. He's been there, he's worked there, and the other two guys are vying for who gets back fast enough to be ready to start on week 1 on the left side. That's how I look at it.
I expect Jed Wells will be your left tackle, DeJuan Jones will be your right tackle, and Jack Conklin will be the swing tackle / if one of those guys sucks or get, whatever, like if DeJuan Jones doesn't play well, you've got Jack Conklin ready to go there. If Jed Wells doesn't play well, you've got Jack Conklin ready to play there. I think he's slightly behind Jed Wells in terms of getting up to 100%, and I think that's why he's being prepped to be a swing tackle. And then ultimately, when he gets back to full health, he may be good enough that he takes one of those jobs, or to be determined. But like, they've got options. They will then have options at that spot.
Well, first, I want to say you guys are lucky. I had to put up with the Seahawks telecast tonight on NFL Plus.
Ooh.
It was rough.
Ooh.
So I wasn't privy to any of this discourse. But I agree. I think it's, for me, it's always been DeJuan at right, just because I think he has the highest ceiling. And I would like to have Jed at left. And then Jack is the world's most expensive swing tackle, because I think he has the altitude. He could come in and it wouldn't be a big deal. I don't think that Jed's like a guy who's just going to all of a sudden just come in the middle of the second quarter and be ready to go. Man, we're cutting it close. I'll say that. We're just cutting it close. T-minus, 14 days, and you still got 2 big question marks. So the sooner the better. I need these guys to get on the field and just get practicing ASAP.
I got to tell you, boys, I'm a little surprised by the conversation here. I'm a little surprised by the 3 takes. If Jack Conklin's healthy, and listen, I'm a huge DeJuan Jones fan. I love what he did last year. I will support him forever. But like, I'm a little surprised that we think that if all 3 guys came in healthy, we think it's going to be Jed Wells and DeJuan Jones. I would not be surprised. It would not surprise me at all to see them throw Jack Conklin out there at the starting right tackle.
I guess I just would have needed to see more from him at this point. I'm worried about him even being ready, but for then, like, I know they said that tonight, but like the fact that he hasn't been out there at all is somewhat concerning, don't you think, Mike?
Dude, and the point, Brad, is that if he is ready, if he's not ready, then that's a totally different conversation. And obviously you're going to play the guys that are healthy. But if he's ready, if we get to week 1 and the ready players are Jed Wells and DeJuan Jones and Jack Conklin, I'm not going to be surprised to see Jack Conklin out there as your starting right tackle.
If you present those circumstances, my contention all along has been Jack Conklin would be the best tackle on the team.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
So, yeah. But the problem is that I don't think we've gotten that situation to this point. The fact is that if they thought Jack Conklin was ready, I don't think he'd be taking left tackle drops at this point.
Yeah.
If the timeline had worked out better, I mean, my preference all along was DeJuan Jones goes to the left side, and that's for the sake of run blocking. Pass protection is valuable everywhere. Run blocking is a little bit more valuable on the right side. DeJuan Jones has to be a lot better at it. But I would still expect DeJuan Jones to start week 1, purely based on the fact that it's Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. And then maybe after that, Jack Conklin would go in. But all this is predicated on if he's ready. If he's ready, then I think he's going to, I don't think Jack Conklin's just going to be sitting there saying to himself, yeah, you guys go ahead and get out there. I think he's going to be pushing those guys. I think, if the Browns, if they've said anything, they want competition. They want guys to be pushing each other. I have to believe that they're going to let him compete, not only because he's been very good, but he's also very expensive. And just from a return on investment standpoint, it would be silly to, it would be misguided for them to put him out there because he's the most expensive. but it would also be misguided for them to not put him out there and let him compete at all. So I presume that second he's ready to go, he's going to be trying to take a spot.
And listen, we're getting a lot of comments. I was just going to do this. And it says, why do you all think Jed is ready? All four of you keep saying it. Jed Wells doesn't look even close to ready. He hasn't played or practiced. But again, we're going based on and Andrew Berry said he feels real confident that we're going to be full on healthy at the offensive line to start the season. He said he felt good about it. He said he felt good about that.
His quote, once again, I don't think he said full on healthy. He alluded to the fact that he would get a couple guys back along the offensive line in the coming weeks. So you can take that to mean what you want. I take it to mean that they expect both of them back at some point in the next 2 weeks. I don't know exactly who's going to be ready on game day. It could be Conlin. It could be Wills. So I'm not saying it is Wills because I agree with you, Shovel. I haven't seen anything that shows me he's anywhere close. But based on what he said, and I think that if they had him out there, you guys can tell me what you guys think. If they had him out there a week before, don't you think they think they could get Wills ready to play in a week? Potentially?
Well, yeah. And don't you guys feel like he is the guy above anybody else? And Pete and Casey, don't you feel like Jed's the guy above anybody else that they're going to push out there? You got to see what you got with Jed Wells this year. He is the most urgent player on the offensive line for them this year.
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
I would just say that the reason I believe Jed Wells is going to be first is Jed Wells has said as much. Kevin Stefanski, I'm convinced that Kevin Stefanski thought he was getting Jed Wells back this week. Yeah. And then whatever happened with the medical staff to push that back, they pushed it back. But it certainly sounds like Jed Wells is right there, and it's just a matter of getting him out there. And to the point of, well, we haven't seen him practice. We haven't seen Jack Conlin practice either. They're both on the
right.
Play. All we've seen is a clip of Jack Conlin taking pass drops, and we've seen reports of a time where Jed Wells did the same thing. So I mean, like that's where we're at. So yeah, I mean, everything has suggested that Jed Wells would be the first one. He had the less serious injury of the two. Whatever has happened since then, he had the less serious surgery. Jack Conlin had the more significant injury, more significant surgery, more significant recovery. So that's the reason I believe that. I mean, perfect world, they're going to say, "Hey, both of these guys are ready Monday. Let's get it. Let's get out there and go." But I think Jed's going to be first. I think Jed's going to be basically right away.
Casey Kinnaman, I want to give you the last word on this before we move to the next position group that I want to talk about. But let's assume they get these guys back. Let's make the assumption. We're working on an assumption that they get these guys back. If they don't get them back, then this assumption is wrong. But let's assume they get these guys back. What's your starting offensive line week one?
Still, I'm going Jed at left, DeJuan at right, and then Jack as the swing. Jack's a little older. He's got a list of injuries, not just what he had last year. He's going into with more injuries. So I think you could slow roll him as the swing tackle, bring him back slower, acclimate him slower, because it's not just week one with Parsons and Lawrence. Week two's Josh Hines Allen and Walker. Week three's Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. Week four's Max Crosby. Like, there's a gauntlet at the front of this schedule of pass rushers. So give me the guys that are the healthiest, that are going to be playing in their natural positions, and just hold on, and hopefully you guys can get healthy along the way by the time you get to the meat of your schedule.
All right, so we're going to find out what they do with offensive line. We're going to find out more about who's healthy and who's not and who's ready to come back. And again, a lot of this conversation is predicated on assumptions that we're making, but really interesting decisions to be made there on the offensive line. Other interesting decisions to be made. Let's go to the wide receiver position. And let's talk about, I think we all are working under the assumption, and maybe not, maybe I'm just doing it, but I feel like we're working under the assumption that they're going to keep 6 wide receivers on the team. And so who some of these guys are. Amari Cooper is going to be on the team. Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman are going to be on this team. But that leaves 2 other spots for guys on this team. You've got Thrash, who has played pretty good minutes in this preseason. You've got David Bell still sitting out there figuring out what they're going to do with him. You got Mike Woods, who all reports on Mike Woods have been that they love Mike Woods, and he's had a great preseason and offseason, and he's making a name for himself in camp. And so, guys, and you guys can just take it however you want to, but how do we feel like this wide receiver room is going to shake out?
Chalk.
Yeah.
I think they're going to keep Thrash and Bell.
Not this chalk.
Yeah.
I think they're going to keep. I think they're going to keep Thrash and Bell, and either somebody's going to call for Michael Woods, or they're going to see if he ends up on the practice squad. Bell's obviously been out with an injury, but the Browns really like David Bell, and
yes,
he's reportedly done well in
good camp,
training camp. They think he fits this offense better than in the past, and he's the greatest fourth down receiver in franchise history. So
yes.
how do you get rid of that? So, and then Jamari Thrash has been very impressive, and the other part that we don't know with Michael Woods, in addition to he's good size, strength, speed, does some things very well. We don't know what the off-field thing was that caused him to be suspended and how that impacts this decision. But all I hear, from coaching, whether it's Stefanski, whether it's Chad O'Shea, is they just talk glowingly about David Bell. And he can do certain things that they used last year, where they used him as a pass protection is like an extra tight end element. So I think ultimately that's going to make the decision, unless Michael Woods is a compelling enough reason on special teams to keep him over David Bell.
I would tend to agree. I think David Bell has kind of been a lock this whole time. We were under understanding he was having a very good camp up until the point he got hurt. I don't know where he's at with his injury. I would expect him back soon to make the 53. It was just a thigh. I don't know though, but that could change things on the initial 53. I doubt they designate him to injury or anything, but I would, assuming at this point that he's back and healthy enough to count him towards your 6, and Jamari Thrash is your other one, and that fills out your room. I would be happy with any of Amarian Brown, Michael Woods, James Prochet, or Jalen Darden on my practice squad. Those 4 guys, I think, are all good candidates for your practice squad. Obviously, you would love to have Woods and Prochet or Brown, ideally. But all 4 of those guys have been impressive in the preseason. I think you've got kind of a wealth of depth down towards the bottom of your wide receiver roster. So any of those guys on the practice squad are good with me. Hopefully Woods can get through because he has shown that he's dynamic at times.
Yeah, I'm clearly a Mikey Trees truther, but I'm not delusional. I think the top 6 receivers are pretty well defined. I like what Bell gives you as far as a possession receiver and someone who's just going to be dependable, perfect bottom of the roster guy, in my opinion. And the real question that Pete brought up is, does Mike Woods get picked up, or if he makes it through the practice squad, they'll be perfect with that. I think they're going to try to get 2 receivers on the practice squad, one with return ability, and then one to develop. So he would be the preferential one, but he may get picked up by another team. I think he'll be with someone that's on the bubble, being in consideration for one of the other 31 NFL teams.
Is he that much more compelling than Austin Watkins was last year?
He's. Yes. Yeah,
I agree.
I think he's better than
I think he is.
But by how much is the question?
Oh, I think he is 100%. Size, speed, route running. I think there's a lot.
Just because he's played in actual NFL games before, I guess. Kind of.
So here's another question. Here's another question that comes up with wide receivers, and I want to get into something we haven't talked about a whole lot. Because, again, I think on the top end of the wide receiver depth chart, it feels like it's really well set. And maybe this is an uncomfortable question, but we got to be talking about an uncomfortable question because that's where we're at this point in the offseason. Do we expect What are we doing with Elijah Moore? I guess is the question. What are we doing? Do we expect we see more out of him?
End arounds. We're doing end arounds.
Why do we keep seeing them running gadget plays to this dude?
I don't know.
Because he's not a gadget play wide receiver. He doesn't have the elusiveness or the quickness to get around on those end around. What's going on with Elijah Moore? I love Elijah Moore. I think especially towards the end of last season.
Do you? It doesn't sound like you do.
No, I do. I think towards the end of last season. They kind of found his role towards the end of the year last year. And now here we are again running him on end arounds and doing these.
He ran one end around tonight. Let's not overreact. It was a preseason. He ran one end around tonight.
But do you want to see more out of him?
Block.
Do you want to see more out of him in the preseason too? Like they've got him out there and you don't see much out of him.
He was out there for the same amount of time that Jameis was. He was out there for 2 drives. He made a nice catch inside the 10-yard line. I mean, he's gonna be valuable to this team. He's gonna be. What do you want to do? Trade him away?
No, it's not. That's not. No. All right, take it easy, Brad.
Well, what are you what are you applying here? Well, I saw I got this on Twitter. It's not you, but I got this on Twitter tonight from people saying that they should trade Elijah Moore away and give Tillman his reps, and I think that's insanity. Why would you want to get rid of any of the depth that this team has at wide receiver before week 1? We have no idea what kind of injuries are coming, let alone he went for 640 yards last year. It's not like he didn't do anything. Yes, they should stop using him in end arounds and gimmick gadget stuff, but other than that, and we know whose fault that is, right, Pete? So, I mean, look at what other teams are doing.
Jim Schwartz is absolutely the reason we keep seeing these stupid end arounds because everybody does them to Jim Schwartz.
Nobody can guard it on the Browns defense.
Look, I think Elijah Moore, what I want to see from him is just a more efficient season, less drops, less weird crap, and just being more effective. I would like to see in perfect world. I would love to see him and Jerry Jeudy in the slot attacking down the field. Obviously, you've got guys like Njoku who can do some of that thing, but Elijah Moore has a very different skill set than a guy like Cedric Tillman. He can do a lot of these quick things, and based on the idea of being able to run your routes based on what the defense is presenting you, he's far more equipped to do that than a guy like Cedric Tillman because he's just lightning quick, super agile. Tremendous route runner. He can do a lot of those things where if you are now empowering him to sort of make his own decisions on that, I think that could be really good for him. But ultimately, I don't know if he's necessarily going to produce more in terms of yardage or touchdowns, but I just want it to be where you feel like, to Brad's point, he had a career high in receiving yards, but I think the goal for this year is to feel better about, let's say he has 640 yards again, and Jerry Jeudy has close to 1,000, and Amari Cooper has, the 1,300, that you feel better about the 640 and how you're getting there, that it's less sweat put into it, and it's just easier and it flows naturally. But he has inside-outside versatility. He can do a few different things that I think are interesting. And yes, to the other point about that, the idea of keeping him versus not keeping him is that, if Jerry Jeudy has a hamstring, suddenly you don't want to be in a situation where you are down, not having that type of receiving element in your offense. So I do like what Elijah Moore can bring. I think part of the reason Elijah Moore is I don't know if you necessarily hate or anything, he just sort of feels boring. Like Jerry Jeudy's the new thing. We haven't seen Jerry Jeudy do squat either, other than, some training camp highlights. But he's the new guy. They've paid him a lot of money. Clearly, they are invested in him. They're not necessarily invested in Elijah Moore. So, but neither one has really done anything where you're sitting there going, "Oh, I can bank on this happening."
I've got to throw this up. Rob Holscher says, "Just tuning in, Mike. It's 2 a.m. How many beers are you in?" A few. I was watching the Browns game. I do have a 6:38 tea time tomorrow morning, so
goodness sakes,
not really excited about that, but we're gonna do it. No, it's guys on the wide receiver end, and especially with the Elijah Moore end, it's not. And Casey, you can chime in here. It's not so much about keeping him or getting rid. Obviously, that's not the question. It's about unlocking this. It's about putting him in the position We're talking about a guy that's got all this potential. Elijah Moore's got tremendous potential, but it seems like in his NFL career so far, unlocking that potential has been a little bit of a challenge, whether he was on the Jets or on the Browns or whatever. And he didn't have a bad year last year. I'm not saying that, but how do we unlock the potential of Elijah Moore?
It's $1 million question. It comes down to usage. And if you just think about it in New York, started off as an outside receiver, bad quarterback play. They draft Garrett Wilson. All of a sudden, he's the afterthought. You get him here. He's used primarily in the slot, which he can do those things. I want to see him used more on the outside, more in the vertical game. But Jerry Jeudy gets nicked up. And it's never nothing major. It's a lot of small stuff. But he's probably going to have to miss some time occasionally. So to have Elijah to kind of kick inside when you need him is valuable. But I definitely want to see him get utilized more in the vertical game on the outside. He gets loose on the second level.
All right. Any last thoughts on the wide receiver room before we move on to the next position group?
Feel good about it. Feel good about what they got there. I haven't seen much of Jerry Jeudy, but I'll even just say this, and I know it's preseason, but throughout the preseason, in all 3 games, no matter who was in at quarterback, guys were getting open.
Yes, true.
And they were able to move the ball up and down the field, whether they scored or not, because they went for it on 4th down so many times. But wide receivers were open all preseason long. Guys had 3-4 catches, 40, 50 yards, everybody that stepped on the field. And I think that's a good sign.
Well, and in tonight's game, Cedric Tillman looked really good early in that game. He just kept getting open, and that's what you want to see out of him. And so, yeah, to your point, Brad, 100% agree. And you're going to watch some guys you like not make this team. Speaking of that, and Brad, you put this, I believe, in our little chat that we had, but the next position group, let's swing it over to the defense, the corner room. You've got incredible top-end corners on this team. As good as any other team in football, top-end corners on this team. But when it comes to the depth and comes to the guys that are going to make this team, there's going to be some questions, and there's probably going to be some players that you really like. If you're watching this, there's going to be some players that you like, that you think should be on this team that are not going to make this team, because that corner room is pretty deep. So, boys, just kind of let's go around the horn and give me your thoughts on the cornerbacks on this roster.
Well, obviously you like the top stuff, but you look at the bottom of the cornerback room that is in consideration for the 53, and it's unproven guys and a project. Halassi's the project. Obviously Harden and Mitchell, just unproven. They haven't had that many reps, so that's they need more time on task. But you like what you see there. I think that if you cut Harden or Halassi, you're not getting him back. One of those guys will get scooped, in my opinion. But if you're keeping Hardy and he's eating up another corner spot, unless you're going to go super thin at safety, you're going to have to probably move off of one of those guys. So you hate to watch good football players go, but like you said, that's kind of where we're at with the corner room. But I don't know how much Denzel's concussion factors into this, how much Greg's injury factors into this. Because if you're without the prospect of not having Denzel to start the season, it's going to be. I would move off Halassi.
No,
but I like Miles Harden a great deal, so it's hard to all of a sudden just kick him out, because I think he gets picked up automatically. It's going to be interesting come Tuesday.
Here's what I think is going to happen, and I'll be interested in what you guys think. I think Newsome's going to start the season on the non-football injury reserved list, which will allow them to keep both guys initially. And then they'll have to make an adjustment further down the line. But I don't think Newsome's close to being back as everybody thinks he is. Once again, I've been kind of steadfast in this thought. I may be wrong. Maybe he's right around the corner and I'm wrong and he's going to be back this week, because they kind of alluded to that tonight, and I thought that doesn't seem right still. But again, if he is on that, then he has to miss 4 weeks. So I don't know about that either. If you have to make a decision on Harden or Halassi, I don't know. I'd love to see the snap count tonight. Did I mean, is there anything that you guys took away from what you saw tonight? I saw them both not playing early
and then play all the way late.
And then play way late, and kind of subbing for each other at times, which is what I thought was kind of strange. So I don't really know where they are with that. Of course, I would rather them keep Harden, but I would rather them keep them both, honestly, and get rid of go back to my point earlier and get rid of Hardy. But Hardy's going to make the team. We know that.
Yes,
so
correct.
I just don't know. Injury wise, they could keep them both until they're healthy, which is ideally how they should try to manage this. And I don't know how you do that with roster gymnastics technically yet until we know more about their injuries.
I was caught surprised by the fact that Zagura suggested that Greg Newsome might be back as early as this week. My reaction to that was I was surprised. I'm not sure, and even if he's back, I don't know what that necessarily means. If that means he's actually going to be activated or whatever, but I had the same thought initially. I'm very curious to see how that plays out. I thought Halesi actually started the game. I'm not 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure he started today.
He may have,
which is why they went to the other side of the field and just threw at the kickoff guy. I think a lot of this comes down to what's more valuable to the Browns right this moment. Is it another boundary corner that's theoretically is very, very similar mold as Martin Emerson, or is it a guy who can function in the slot like Miles Harden? Right this second, I would say it's probably the slot guy based on the Newsome situation. But if Newsome's back, then I would probably bounce back the other way and say it's Halasi. But I'm not overly convinced that Halasi will get scooped up. I guess maybe he will. I find him an intriguing player. It also would not break my heart to see him leave. He's very intriguing to me. I'm more interested in what Miles Harden could theoretically bring. But I know that is the slot position right now is a sore spot for Jim Schwartz. And we saw that in play in this game, although the one pass was indefensible that was thrown to Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's just a beautiful, beautiful ball and catch. But I do think that's more of a pressure area right this moment. So I'm very curious to see how that works out. And then this may be a situation where somebody may pick up the phone and call the Browns for one of these guys, and that may make the decision for them. But right this second, I would be inclined to say Miles Harden's going to make it over Halasi, but to be determined if the Newsome situation changes that or not.
Gentlemen, as we kind of run through an hour here, let's hit a couple quick hitters before we get out of here, and let's go to a position that a lot of people are going to talk about. And I don't think it's anything breaking, or I don't think it's anything outrageous, but let's talk about the quarterback position. Obviously, Deshaun Watson is going to be your starter, but I remember hearing them say that Jameis Winston was going to play the entire first half tonight. He did not do that. He played 2 series, and then they got him out. And then you had DTR, and then you had Tyler Huntley play. So just real quick, just go around the horn, and how should the Browns handle the quarterback room going into the season?
Keep Watson, Winston, and DTR on the roster, and try to move, Huntley, if possible. But if not, he's gonna try to get him through your practice squad, like Nathan was saying tonight. I don't think that's gonna happen. But I mean, DTR was freaking fantastic, man. He was great again tonight. I thought he was really, really good. Going to his left, that ball he threw to Darden in the end zone.
Yes.
I mean, that was a freaking dime, dude.
Yes.
He has that pass to Darden in the end zone. The other passes he made, the long ball to Darden or to Thrash for the touchdown.
Yes.
I mean, he is just in rhythm and he was throwing seeds all over the yard. I was incredibly impressed again with DTR. He is so fun. You've got to keep him around because I think his ceiling is high. So I think you have to keep him on the roster. So you're going to carry 3 quarterbacks.
They pulled DTR way too early, in my opinion. I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to showcase Huntley for prospective buyers, but he's got enough tape out there. If someone's interested, they would have already been interested. You know, he has a prior working relationship with Greg Roman in Los Angeles. Like, I would target that. But if everything goes according to plan, we're not going to get to see DTR until next preseason. So I would have left him out there and just let him continue to develop. Like, for me, I don't know. I get what they're trying to do, but I would have liked to see DTR get a few more series.
I will take all the series of DTR I can get, although he seemed pretty intent on dying on the field in this one, so I was content that they took him out. Like, he showed a lot of guts staring down a couple of those hits, but also a couple of things he should have thrown away as opposed to taking hits. And I was very happy to see Tyler Huntley throw 3 touchdowns because, again, there are some very sketchy backup situations, and it becomes very easy to go, well, Tyler Huntley's been to a Pro Bowl, whatever the hell you want to call that, and he's at least played a whole lot of football, including a playoff game. He's better than what we got. Let's go ahead and flip a pick or whatever to go get him. So I was perfectly content with that. But, yeah, I mean, DTR, I've said all along, I think DTR's eyes are on Jameis Winston, not Tyler Huntley, in terms of competing. I think he's improved. I think he improves every time he's out there. Easy arm strength, accuracy. He's showing a lot of really good timing. I think he's really well fit in this offense. And you see a lot of the experience from being coached by Chip Kelly and the number of things that he was asked to do in that offense, which are really allowing him to be good. He can. Guys are better around him with him out there. So I love what I see.
I've been told by Twitter that if the Browns can just accumulate one more 7th round pick for a guy like Tyler Huntley, CeeDee Lamb's on his way to Cleveland. That's what Twitter has told me. That's what I've been told. So just if we could just trade 12 7th round picks to Dallas, they're willing to send a CeeDee Lamb to the Browns. So we got to be excited about that, boys. We got to be excited about that. All right. Pete, you put one last thing in, and before we get out of here for tonight's post-game show, just any other bubble guys, any guys that we haven't talked about, any guys that haven't come up tonight. We've talked about the offensive line and the quarterback and the wide receiver and some of the cornerbacks and all that stuff, but any other bubble guys on the defensive line or at the linebacker position or whatever that you guys have your eye on over the next couple days as the Browns get ready to cut their roster down and finalize things?
The 2 guys that jump out to me that I think the guy who's going to be a really difficult cut if they ultimately cut him is Zach Johnson, the center who jumped in at right tackle in this game. He's 27. All I see from him is I see stuff that looks like, decent play. So I'm very curious to see if they can hold on to him. I'm also curious if the Browns will end up keeping a guy like Tyler Coyle. He's played like no reps because he barely got here, but he fits like the profile of what they want in sort of that DeAnthony Bell type safety. If DeAnthony Bell is going to be, whether he's available or not, I think a guy like Tyler Coyle is going to be interesting in terms of the practice squad because you haven't seen a whole lot of him, but he's fits that type of thing. So those are guys I'm interested in. I continue to think Diabate is, to me, more impressive than Devin Bush. I think he's safer than Devin Bush. A lot's going to depend on what is the status of Tony Fields, what is the status of Buki Watson, and whether that impacts their decision. But it wouldn't surprise me if Devin Bush is on the outside looking in and ultimately a guy they put on the practice squad.
I love that linebacker room. I see a lot of promise there. Diabate's development's fascinating to me. Just watch what he came from as a pass rusher in college to being he's really trusting his fundamentals now, and he has the athleticism. I pray he sneaks onto this roster. Jason Tarver loves him from Tony Fields, but Fields has been banged up since the 31st of July. So are they going to hold a spot for him? And obviously Watson is, I believe, the Sam of the future. So I think they're going to try to get him on there some way, somehow. And I think Bush has better movement skills than Fields. So I would rather see Bush than Fields. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But with those injuries between Watson and Fields, you just don't know where they stand on those guys.
All right, hold on. We got to take a quick pause because I'm about ready to go to bed. And all of a sudden, early morning time, a guy's got his coffee, a guy's got his whiskey, a guy's got his English breakfast going on over there. Beans and toast. And I see him popping in over here. We just got to bring him in. How about Jack Duffin? Jack, it's like 5:15 in the morning over there, or whatever time, 7:15 in the morning, whatever time
the
it
sun is out.
What are you doing over there?
What the hell are you doing, Jack?
Yeah. Originally, I'd get up about 45 minutes ago, but I decided to set a 3 o'clock alarm. Got like 2 hours sleep. I watched up until Hopkins scored the field goal, and then I was like, "Yeah, that's enough. I'm off to bed."
Well, listen, man, we're not going to go much longer than what we've gone, but just give us some of your main takeaways from the 3 games this preseason and what you expect to see over the next week.
I don't know how he played today, but Chris Edmonds has been an interesting one. Looked quite good on special teams, safety. That could be a UDFA sleeper. And really interesting to see what happens with Cohen. That's the other sort of UDFA guy that I weren't really sure. I thought it was weird that he joined the Browns because keeping the 10th offensive lineman when you've got wanting to keep 3 safeties didn't quite mesh. But I maintain a wild card of 2 tight ends could be in play. Don't know how long it'd last because if I'm blocking, I would rather send out Jack Conklin if he's potentially the swing tackle than have whatever blocking tight end you might sign. And then if I want to pass the ball, I would rather have like Cedric Tillman if he's your 4th wide receiver out there than Akins, whatever other guy. So part of me thinks there's an interesting dynamic of 2 tight ends. I would give it a go because the talent's not there. Andrew Berry tends to go, hey, if I need 3 people in this position room on the 53, let's have 4 going into camp. He's not really a dress tight end. Who knows? He did the same thing with running back last year and then traded for someone. But the roster's in a really, really good spot. I'm pretty pumped. I'm happy with the talent base and I'm not too worried. Our backups aren't as good as other people's starters. That's what we learned in preseason. That's not shocking news.
No. Can I the position I have a question about, just throw this out there real quick. It's kind of weird right now. Like, I didn't think it would be an issue, but has kind of fallen into a weird place now is, are you going to go into the 53 with just 2 running backs on the roster at this point? Because I don't know what Pierre Strong's standing is. Are you going to keep Aiden Robbins around? Like, I know you got 2 weeks, but all of a sudden it's kind of a question because I don't expect what's his name to be Nyheim Hines to be back in time. So what do you want to do at running back?
Foreman, Ford, and waiver claim.
Okay.
I mean, sure. I think ultimately, and Robbins was a practice squad guy. I know all these people like Pierre Strong. I at someday maybe I will see it. This is not that day. And then the Nyheim Hines question is a legitimate one. But if he's on PUP, that's fine. And then you just bring in a waiver guy. There's going to be backs available. There are always backs available. Grab one.
The only thing that I would say there is they like Pierre Strong. There's a reason he was here all throughout the season last year, and injuries obviously play a part in that. But there's a reason he's still here, and so I would expect them to go into the season until Nyheim Hines is ready, and obviously until Nick Chubb is ready. But I would. They like what they see out of Pierre Strong, and I'm not sure anybody this offseason in camp has stolen any of that luster away from him. And I would expect them to go with Pierre Strong and just keep it with a guy that you're familiar with and that you trust.
I get your point in that they traded for him. He's hurt though. I don't even know how hurt he is. I mean, he hurt his ribs. Seriously, he had to be taken off the field in an ambulance. So I don't know what his standing is even to make the roster in 2 weeks. And to Pete's point, I think you might be able to find a better back that can stay on his feet more than him on the waiver wire. So I guess to me, it's dependent on what's out there as far as waiver claims.
I just don't know what kind of role.
I know the Denver Broncos are overloaded at running back. I think the Chargers are overloaded at running back. There are going to be teams. Obviously, fit is always a question, and the reason they like Pierre Strong is because he's fast.
Yeah.
But it may not matter. I mean, it's just going to depend on what's available.
Casey, go ahead.
I just don't know what kind of role Strong actually provides for you. To me, he's a one-dimensional running back with no contact balance. A lot of people are fascinated in him. He does give you something in the return game, but I don't keep him around just for that. I think you can find a more complete back on the waiver wire.
I still see a world where Nick Chubb comes back. I know I've said it since I've looked at that contract. I still, even if it's just like, hey, he plays 5-10 snaps, because if you're wide receiver 3, you probably get 2-3 snaps a game. We're not talking like it needs to be a big role week 1. So I still see a world where they potentially turn to that. I can see Strong around, just still Hines is there as, hey, it's third running back returner. But it's going to be interesting when there's a point where there's Hines, there's Chubb, and who is the other running back. So that battle, even as the season goes on, between Ford and Foreman, that's going to be a really interesting one, because every time I see Foreman, I'm thinking, hey, he's probably going to get 4 to 5 yards for this. Every time it's Ford, I'm like, hey, is it going to be 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1? Or, hey, might this one be the 15? That's just not a way you want to run the ball.
I think Ford's the more explosive, better player in the long run. But either way, I think Ford will be on the 53 as long as he's healthy for this season. Either way, that's just my opinion. Because I mean, look at how productive he was last year. I mean, and I just think that he can be as explosive in the pass game. He's dynamic as a pass catcher. He can make a big play here and there. And I think that's a nice, if you do have Nick Chubb back, it's certainly a nice, second guy to go to if you need him, or in the pass game if you need him. And if he's not there, then it's him and Foreman, and they are kind of make the perfect duo of, fast and hard hitting. Either way, I think I think they like Ford a lot. I really do.
Brad, if there's anything we've learned under Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and the guys that they like to bring in and they like to utilize, I really, really, really think that the number one word that you can use to describe those guys is versatile. They love guys that can do multiple things. They love guys that you can't just put into a box and say they're this guy or that guy. And so to your point, Brad, Jerome Ford's that kind of guy. You can't necessarily put him into a box. You can't necessarily say he's this guy. He can go out and get you some receiving yards. He can get you some rushing yards. And all around the roster, whether it's running back or wide receiver or cornerback or safety or whatever, they've proven to us time and time again they love those kind of players.
Last comment to Jack's point on Nick Chubb. Listen, I'll tell you this. If he does play week 1, and I think it's far-fetched, but Jack, you've maintained this for some time. If he does play, I guarantee a win. They will be so up. They will be so up if he plays week 1. I mean, there's no chance they lose.
I'm already up just based on you saying that.
Yeah. No pun intended.
I didn't mean it like that. Well, it is OBR After Dark. So,
and just throw it out there could be the scenario where he's on the 53 and he's inactive for the first couple of games.
I don't care. That's enough.
If they want to play him before week 5, he has to be cleared off PUP. So if he's on PUP, he misses the first 4 weeks at least. So that's why I just think he's going to be on the 53-man roster. With all that's been going on, all the hype around, hey, he's looking really good, I don't think he's not good enough to go until week 5. And you can easily, if you stuck Pierre Strong on the practice squad, you can call him up for a couple of games if Nick Chubb just needs another week or something. It's running backs at the end of the day. You can bring him in throw them into a system and they can make it work. It's not like you need chemistry like some of the other
Jack's
spots.
Point, who is claiming Pierre Strong if you waive him?
No one.
And that's ultimately
Carolina.
why I think it could be. I mean, but I think that ultimately drives a lot of these decisions for the Browns is like they have to think about this. Who is going to claim player X? That's 100. The reason I've been on the whole 2 tight end thing the whole time is who is going to claim these guys that the Browns are going to waive. Maybe it happens. Maybe somebody likes ZMP that much, but ultimately I don't think they will. Or they've cut enough of them between him and Trayon, whatever, Wyoming dude. Welch, who I like, but I think is ultimately going to be available to the practice squad. I think there's so many, I think, again, to Jack's point, people get too caught up in numbers and not about value of overall players. I think as much as he can, Andrew Brace's going to keep the 53 best football players he can, which goes against Jack, is that DTR is going to be one of those players and is very valuable. And that's sort of what I think is going to drive that decision. So I'm going to continue. If Nick Chubb is back, great. But you're going to be surprised with some of the backs that are available when we hit waivers. That you're going to be like, we're keeping these guys over this, and I don't think it's going to work out like that.
I've kind of had 3 players in mind for 2 spots: DTR at quarterback, Cohen at guard, whoever at tight end. It could be someone off the roster. I see 2 of them staying. And that's just going to be the interesting decision. They've got to go one way either way, whether it's the 3rd quarterback, the 10th offensive lineman, the 3rd tight end. And it just comes down to, do the front office see there is a 50% or more chance that DTR is the backup quarterback in a year's time? Well, none of us know the answer to that in their eyes. But if they think, hey, there's a 50% chance he can replace James Winston in a year's time, you keep him. If they're like, look, he's going to just be a quarterback 3 for the next 3 years, there's no point keeping him around. And that's the question they need to ask themselves. There's certainly a route to him doing it, but do they have the confidence he can develop into that with no play time, the 3rd QB on the team, so he's not going to get much practice time there? Where's that stack?
I think he's good. I think they think he is that. I think he is that. And I think you have to keep him. I think you'd be crazy to let him out your door.
What a change. What a change from when
I also think Javian Cohen's
drafted him. And
I think Javian Cohen's going to end up on the practice squad.
I was pissed about the position, Mike.
I'm never letting it go. Listen. It is 2:30 in the morning. It is 7:30 in the morning London time. Jack's got to make breakfast. He's got to get some tea going over there, and we're going to get going here. It has been a blast talking about the last preseason game, but we're going to get out of here. Listen, with the OBR streaming network, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to get you ready for the Cleveland Browns opener against the Dallas Cowboys. Whether it is, I don't even know how many shows we're doing every week. We're doing multiple shows almost every day going into the season. So make sure you're tuned into the OBR streaming network. Make sure you get to the OBR.com and hit subscribe and get everything set up so you can read all the stuff these guys are doing on the OBR.com, leading you into Cleveland Browns football in games that matter. Week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. You do not want to miss everything that the OBR's got going on. So make sure you are tuned into that. Anyways, for the 400 people that are hanging out with us right now at 2:30 in the morning, because you're all lunatics. You're all crazy talking about the Cleveland Browns at 2:30 in the morning. For all of you guys, Brad, Casey, Pete, Jack, thank you guys for jumping in. Thank you guys for talking Browns. We will be at it nonstop all the way through the Brown season. So just make sure you're tuned in to the OBR. For all these guys, for everybody else at the OBR, thank you for jumping in with us. Thank you for hanging out. The Browns lose the last preseason game, but lots of good stuff to talk about, lots of fun stuff. And we are now, the next time we see the Browns on the field, it's going to mean something, and we're all excited about that. We will talk to you then, and we will lead you up until then. Until then, thank you, everybody. Go Browns, and cheers.